Hello and welcome to UPSC Mains PYQ series by Shikra Academy. In these live sessions, we are discussing all the GS mains questions asked by UPSC over the past years. So in today's session, we will be discussing the 2023 GS paper 2 from question number 1 to question number 5. So starting with question number 1, constitutionally guaranteed judicial independence is a prerequisite of democracy. We have to comment on this statement. It is a 10-marker question that we have to answer in 150 words. Now, mapping it with the syllabus, we can see that it has been asked from the subject of constitution and polity and constitution. And the topic is mostly the significant provisions regarding constitution and the judiciary. Now, the approach that we'll be taking in answering such a question is that we have to comment on this statement. So when we have to comment on certain statement, a certain introductory statement is given, a certain question statement is given, we have to deal with that particular statement first in the introduction. Then in comment, we have to provide different dimensions to the answer. So we can write about the importance of the judicial independence and the constitutional provisions regarding the judicial independence in the country. Had it been a 15-marker question, then we have to add some another aspect, like we can give the real life examples or the important judicial judgments of the Supreme Court and the High Courts. So starting with the introduction, in introduction, we describe the judicial independence. In body, we address the main demand of the question by commenting on the role of the judicial independence, that is the importance of judicial independence, then the constitutional provisions that are there in the Indian Constitution that provide for judicial independence, and then in conclusion, we summarize the answer. So starting with the introduction, judicial independence is a cornerstone of a vibrant democracy. So it is a cornerstone, it is essential for a vibrant democracy. Why it is so? Because it ensures that judiciary functions free from executive or the legislative influence, thereby upholding the rule of law and protecting the rights of the citizens. So that is the description of the judicial independence. Now, why it is crucial? What is the role? What is the significance? What is the importance of judicial independence? Firstly, is that of checks and balances. Judicial independence, if the judiciary is independent from the influence of executive and legislature, so it prevents the concentration of power by acting as a watchdog over both legislature and over the executive. Second is the safeguarding of the rights. It protects the fundamental rights of the citizens against the arbitrary state action, that is against both legislatures as well as executive. Third is the upholding the rule of law. So it ensures independent judiciary ensures that laws are applied equally and which fosters a public trust in governance. Okay, equal implementation of laws among the population enhances the trust in the overall governance and the overall state. Fourth is the democratic stability. The independent courts, they strengthen the democratic institutions by resolving the disputes impartially. Now, what are the constitutional provisions in India regarding the judicial independence? So first is the security of tenure of judges. So in the higher judiciary for the high courts and Supreme Court, the judges, they have a security of tenure. Article 124 pertains to the security of tenure for Supreme Court judges, and Article 217 pertains to the security of tenure for the High Court judges. Then there are salaries and allowances are charged on the consolidated fund of India. So both the salaries of the Supreme Court judges are charged on the consolidated fund of India. The salaries of the judges of the High Court or the justice of the High Courts are charged on the consolidated fund of that particular state. And the pensions of both the Supreme Court and the High Court judges are charged upon on the consolidated fund of India. Okay, so no voting takes place in the parliament regarding the expenditure that pertains to the salaries and allowances of the High Court and Supreme Court judges. Then there are restrictions on discussions of judges' conduct in the parliament. Now, if a motion or resolution is not being discussed in the parliament regarding the impeachment or removal of a judge. Apart from that, the conduct of the judges cannot be discussed on the floor of the parliament, and that is safeguard that is according to Article 121. Then finally, there is power of judicial review to strike down the unconstitutional laws that was made prominent in the Keshwananda Bharti case of 1973. Then, in conclusion, we summarize the answer by writing that without the judicial independence, democracy risks sliding into authoritarianism. Okay, so democracy get converted into authoritarian regime. Thus, constitutionally guaranteed judicial autonomy is not merely desirable; it is indispensable for sustaining the democratic ideals of a society or of a state. Moving on to the next question, that is question number 2. Who are entitled to receive free legal aid? Assess the role of National Legal Services Authority or NALSA in rendering free legal aid in India. 10-mark question that we have to answer in 150 words. Mapping it with the syllabus, we can see that it has been asked from the subject of polity, and mainly it is from the judiciary, and the subtopic is the legal aid. Now, seeing the approach, in introduction, we describe the free legal aid in India, the provisions regarding the free legal aid. Then, in body, we address the demand of question by writing the beneficiaries under the Legal Services Authorities Act of 1987. Because the question is asking us to list down who the people who are entitled to receive the free legal aid in India. Then, in the body, we have to write the role of NALSA and certain judicial interpretation regarding the legal aid in the country. Then, in conclusion, we can summarize the answer by writing the significance of the NALSA. So, starting with the introduction, we can write that access to justice is a fundamental right under Article 39A of the Constitution. According to the uh, DPSP, Article 39A, Directive Principles of State Policy, Article 39A of the Constitution, the access to justice is the fundamental right. To ensure that no person is denied legal support due to poverty or social disadvantage, free legal aid is provided in India, and that is according to the Legal Services Authorities Act of 1987. Okay, under the Legal Services Authorities Act of 1987, certain categories of people or certain category of citizens are entitled to the free legal aid in the country. And what are those people? Especially women and children, scheduled castes and scheduled tribe, members of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, victims of human trafficking or begar, persons with disabilities, PWDs, industrial workmen, persons in custody, including the juveniles, people less than 18 years of age, and citizens with annual income below prescribed limit. That this prescribed limit varies from state to state. Now, let's discuss the role of NALSA. So, NALSA as an organization, as a statutory body, was established in the year 1995, and it frames the policies and programs for the free legal aid in the country. NALSA organizes the Lok Adalats for speedy settlement of disputes. It also implements schemes like the legal literacy camps, the victim compensation, and the legal aid clinics. It also coordinates with the state legal services authorities as well as the district legal services authorities, and it ensures the justice delivery to the marginalized sections, thus upholding equality before law, the principle of equality before law under Article 14. Now, talking about the judicial interpretation, we can give a real life, we can enhance or we can enrich our answer by writing the judicial examples. So, first is the Husainara Khatun versus State of Bihar case 1979, in which the Supreme Court held that the free legal aid is an essential part of the Article 21, that is right to life. Then in Khatri versus State of Bihar in 1981, the Supreme Court reiterated that the state must provide legal aid to the indigenous accused persons. Okay? So these are the two judicial cases that you can write in order to enhance your answer. So after these cases in 1979 and 1981, then the Parliament came up with the Legal Services Authorities Act of 1987. Under this NALSA, the state legal services authorities and the district legal services authorities were established. Now, in conclusion, we can summarize by writing the significance of NALSA. We can write that NALSA supported by judicial activism. Okay. So, legal aid plus judicial activism, it ensures that justice for all. Okay, both of these things they ensure justice for all, and by empowering the vulnerable, it strengthens the rule of law in the country and an inclusive democracy. Moving on to the question number 3. The states in India seem reluctant to empower urban local bodies both functionally as well as financially. We have to comment on this statement. It is a 10-mark question that we have to answer in 150 words. Now, mapping it with the syllabus, we can see that it has been asked from the subject of polity, and the topic is devolution of powers and finances up to local levels and challenges therein. So it is a question focusing on urban local bodies. We have to justify the statement by giving that the states in India, the state governments, they are reluctant in empowering the urban local bodies by both functionally as well as financially. So they are not devolving functions to them and are also not giving them proper finances in order for them to sustain and run effectively. So seeing the approach in introduction, we describe the urban local bodies and the constitutional provision regarding the urban local bodies. Then in body, we address the demand of question by writing the functional reluctance of the states, the financial reluctance of the state, and the resulting consequences. Okay, what these reluctance of the states are doing, what harm they are doing to the urban local bodies. And then in conclusion, we summarize the answer and provide a way forward. So starting with the introduction, the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act in the year 1992 mandated the creation of urban local bodies, and 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, it mandated the creation of Panchayati Raj institutions. Okay, so the urban local bodies were mandated as the third tier of government to promote the grassroots democracy in cities or the urban areas. However, so this is our linking line that is linking introduction and the body. States retain significant control, limiting the autonomy of these urban local bodies. Now, what are the functional reluctance as well as the financial reluctance of the states? So, state governments often do not devolve the 18 functions listed in the 12th schedule. So, in the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, it added the 12th schedule in the Constitution, and it lists 18 functions that the state governments has to devolve to the urban local bodies in due course of time. Okay, and these functions are like urban planning, water supply, waste management, etc. Second are the parastatal bodies. Example like the development authorities, water boards, and transport corporation that continue to dominate sidelining the municipalities. We can give the examples in Maharashtra particularly. We have the Mumbai Metropolitan Region Development Authority (MMRDA), which dominate and sidelining the municipal corporations. Okay, so in case in other cities like here in Gurgaon, we have the GMDA, Gurgaon Metropolitan Development Authority, and different type of these Metropolitan Region Development Authority have come up across the cities in the country. Then there are bureaucratic controls which reduces the decision-making powers of the elected representatives. Then we can give an example of Kerala as a case study, which has shown better functional devolution through participatory planning. So Kerala is an exception. It has shown a much better functional devolution, much better devolution of these 18 functions to the urban local bodies through the participatory planning. Then we have to write about financial reluctance. So the urban local bodies, they remain dependent on states and central transfers. Okay, the transfer of money from the central government as well as the state governments. The property tax is the main revenue source for these urban local bodies. So for municipalities across India, the property tax is their main revenue source, but it is poorly tapped due to political interference. Okay, we can give example of certain states. In states like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, property tax collection is weak due to political interference. Then there are state governments that delay or divert funds recommended by the state finance commissions. So state finance commissions, they give recommendations to the state governments regarding all the funds that should be given to these urban local bodies and the panchayati raj institutions, or these third tier or the grassroots democracy bodies. But the state governments, they delay and divert the funds into some other infrastructure, or in gap in covering their revenue gap, in freebies and all this other things. Then there are lack of borrowing powers, and professional financial management weakens their fiscal autonomy. So there are very limited avenues for, or these urban local bodies, they have very low borrowing powers. Okay, but in Bengaluru, in Karnataka, experimented with the municipal bonds. So Karnataka as a state, it experimented with the municipal bonds, which but most states restrict the ULB's borrowing powers. So here we can give two examples, two positive points, one from Kerala, one from Karnataka. Now, discussing the consequences. Now, what does this lack of devolution of functions and finances to the urban local bodies, what harm it does? So, it leads to poor service delivery in housing, in waste management and transport. Secondly, it weakens the institutional capacity to manage the rapid urbanization. So, cities in India are facing rapid urbanization. So, these municipal bodies or the urban local bodies, they lack the institutional capacity to manage or handle such rapid urbanization. Third, there is declining citizen trust at the grassroots democracy. Ask any common citizen, and they just start to say bad words, or they start to abuse their municipalities because of the lack of civic amenities in our cities. Okay. Then we can write the conclusion, we can summarize the answer, and also provide certain way forward or a forward looking conclusion. So ULBs, the urban local bodies, cannot act as true democratic institutions unless states devolve them with real powers. Learning from Kerala's participatory model and Karnataka's fiscal innovations, states must ensure functional autonomy and financial independence for sustainable urban governance. Moving on to the next question, that is question number 4. Compare and contrast the British and Indian approaches to parliamentary sovereignty. A 10-mark question that we have to answer in 150 words. Now, mapping in with this syllabus, we can see that it has been asked from the subject of polity and constitution, and the topic is comparison of Indian constitutional scheme with other countries. And in this question, we have to compare the British model or the British approach with the Indian approach regarding the parliamentary sovereignty. Now, in introduction, we write a contextual introductory line. In body, we mainly address the demand of question by making a comparison between the British approach and the Indian approach regarding the parliamentary sovereignty. And in conclusion, we summarize the answer. It is quite a static question. Okay. Starting with the introduction. So the parliamentary sovereignty denotes the supreme authority of the legislature to make or unmake the laws. So this is the definition of parliamentary sovereignty. It is the supreme authority. Sovereignty means supreme authority. So in parliamentary sovereignty, the parliament is the supreme body. It is the supreme authority of legislatures to make or to make any laws or to discard any laws. Britain follows an absolute parliamentary sovereignty. India practices parliamentary supremacy with the constitutional limit. So, in Britain, we have parliamentary sovereignty. In India, we have parliamentary supremacy. Okay. But that supremacy lies within the constitutional limits. So, we can say that in India, we have the constitutional sovereignty. Now, discussing the approach. So, in British, in the UK, Parliament is supreme. So, Parliament is the supreme body, and there is no written constitution. In Britain, there is no written constitution. They have just written laws, but are not compiled. They have written legislations, but are not compiled to form a single written constitution. Okay. In Britain, the Parliament can make, amend, or repeal any law. No authority, including the courts, can question its validity. Okay. In India, the courts can question the validity of the things that the legislature or the parliament does, but in Britain there is no such scope. So we can give the example during the Brexit legislation, when the British Parliament came up with the British Brexit legislation regarding the exit of Britain from the European Union, the courts had no power to question its validity or interfere in the entire process. Okay, so this demonstrated the parliament's absolute power in making laws in Britain. In India, we have a written constitution which is supreme, not the parliament. In India, constitution is supreme, not the parliament. Parliament can legislate, but subject to constitutional provisions and judicial review under Article 13. And particularly in the Keshwananda Bharati case of 1973, the Supreme Court ruled that Parliament cannot alter the basic structure of the Constitution. Federalism and fundamental rights are the further checks in for the Indian Parliament. Now, in summarizing the comparison, in UK there is absolute sovereignty of Parliament. In India there is limited sovereignty. Constitution is supreme, and the judiciary acts as the guardian. Now, in conclusion, we can summarize the answer by writing: while Britain upholds the parliamentary omnipotence, India ensures a balanced system where sovereignty is shared between Parliament, Constitution, and judiciary to preserve the democracy. Moving on to the final question, that is question number 5. Discuss the role of presiding officers of state legislatures in maintaining order and impartiality in conducting legislative work and in facilitating the best democratic practices. So 10-mark question that we have to answer in 150 words. Now, mapping it with the syllabus, we can see that it has been asked from the subject of polity, and the topic is state legislature. Okay, and it is asking about the presiding officers. Okay, so in state legislatures, we can have the state legislative assemblies. In 6 of the states, we have the legislative councils also. So, in legislative councils, we have the chairperson. In the legislative assemblies, we have the speakers. So, in introduction, we describe the presiding officers of both the legislative assemblies as well as the legislative councils. Then, in body, we write about the role of these presiding officers. And in conclusion, we summarize the answer. So, starting with the introduction, so presiding officers, speakers for legislative assemblies, and chairperson for legislative councils of state legislatures occupy a pivotal role in ensuring the smooth functioning of democratic institutions. Their authority derives from the constitution and establish the legislative conventions. Now, this is an introduction that you can also write for the speaker of Lok Sabha as well, and the chairperson or the ex officio chairperson of the Rajya Sabha, that is the vice president. Now, the role of these presiding officers. So, what are these roles of the presiding officers? So, first is the maintaining order and impartiality. So, they act as the neutral umpire. The presiding officers, they regulate debates, they enforce rules of procedure, and ensures the discipline in the house. Second is impartiality by rising above their party affiliations. So, in India, even though the presiding officers do remain members of their party, but it is expected that they have now risen above their party affiliations, which safeguard fairness in legislative deliberations. Third is the adjournments and the suspension powers, which use judicially to prevent the disruptions and ensure decorum in the house. So they have the presiding officers, they have the power to adjourn the house, and they also have the powers to suspend any of the members. This is done very judicially to prevent the disruptions and ensure the decorum and discipline in the house. Second is the facilitating legislative framework. That is, they set the agenda, they decide the order of business, and prioritize the bills for the discussions. Then there are committee referrals. The presiding officers, they refer the matters to the various committees of the house for detailed scrutiny and enhancing the overall legislative efficiency of the house. Then there are certification of bills. In bicameral states, we have 6 bicameral states, that is states having both legislative assembly as well as legislative council. For example, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Bihar, and Uttar Pradesh. So they certify money bills So the money bills are certified in the legislative assemblies, which is a crucial constitutional responsibility. So the presiding officer or the speaker of the legislative assemblies in these states, they certify certain bills as money bills, and which is their constitutional responsibility. Then finally, it is promoting the democratic practices. So they become the voice or they give the voice to the opposition. So they protect the minority rights, that is the rights of the minority parties in the house, and ensure their participation in the house. Then there are ethics and accountability. The presiding officers, they uphold the legislative norms and address the breaches of privilege. And finally, there is their role in anti-defection. The presiding officers, they decide the disqualification petitions under the 10th schedule or the anti-defection law. Okay. So in conclusion, we have to summarize the answer by writing: the presiding officers are the custodians of the legislative integrity. Their impartial conduct strengthens deliberative democracy, fosters consensus building, and ensures that the legislature remains true to their representative character. Now, the PDF of these model answers will be available